Good morning to all the audience. Welcome to the webinar. We have with us Miss Mamata, CEO of Hydrilla Farms. Hydrilla is a home of holistic and sustainable farming solutions for Indians through hydroponics, aquaponics, indoor garden, and vertical farming. Hydrilla specializes in hydroponics and aquaponics, turnkey farms solutions, and system manufacturing. Mamata has keen interest on plant nutrient research, and today she will be sharing her research and work and possibility of growing medicinal plants like turmeric and stevia using soilless farming methods. Ms. Mamata, welcome. Please continue your talk.
Good morning, friends. Happy to be here today to talk to you regarding growing of medicinal plants in hydroponics. I'm going to specifically talk regarding the growing of turmeric and stevia in hydroponics as part of the continued research work of efficiency of growing various medicinal plants in hydroponics and aquaponics, which we are doing it at our firm Hydrilla in Bangalore. So last 2 years, we have successfully grown various medicinal plants. Turmeric and stevia being one of them. So I have chosen to talk more regarding these two crops today. Before going further deep into the growth of these two crops, turmeric and stevia, I want to give you a general picture on the whole medicinal plants scenario, okay, and the requirements. Now, there is a growing demand for herbal products worldwide, and that actually has grown multifold ever since COVID last year. Now, even of all the drugs like used in Western medicine, many drugs are synthesized artificially, made in lab. However, still around 40 to 45% are natural products or compounds derived from them. One or two compounds, at least in the overall drug making, will come from natural products derived from plants. Now, so this growing business is from just naturally derived medicinal products will be estimated around 5 trillion US dollars by 2050. Now, coming to our country, how can we take benefit of this country is one good thing is we are already one of the 12 mega biodiversity centers with 8,000 medicinal plant variety species. Thanks to our diversity in our climatic conditions, the topography of the various regions in our country. However, all these medicinal plants grow in the wild, the forests of, say, northeastern states, northern states like Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, and then down south in the Western Ghats, Eastern Ghats, majorly many forest areas. So, however, because the production in of the plants grown in the wild naturally is not going to meet the demands of the medicinal plants industry. So commercial cultivation is very much required because there's a lot of exploitation of the wild resources which is already happening. We have been also seeing that many species are already declining as well. So there is a requirement that to cater to the demands of the pharma industry, we should also get into the large scale commercial cultivation of these medicinal plants. Now, when it comes to cultivation of medicinal plants, the first and foremost important factor which everyone has to keep in mind is the right seed or the planting material. We need high yielding varieties. We need to say procure species that grows in the wild, and then through micro propagation, through plant tissue culture, develop the excellent quality planting material replicating the all the properties of that plant grown in the wild, and then supply it to the farmers. After getting this successful planting material, the next step is the agronomic guidance. Growing medicinal plants, needs the specific knowledge about that agroclimatic conditions and the nutrient requirements of that particular plant. So there is a knowledge requirement of when is the maturity period. When I talk about maturity period, it's not just in terms of the how much the plant is grown or the number of leaves, etc. It is about how much time does it take for a plant to build up the necessary essential oils or compounds which the company needs to extract actually. So it is very important that the farmer understands the maturity period and the time of harvesting of a crop. Then we need advanced cultivation practices to increase the harvest and also the quality of the essential oils and extracts. Then there is very important factor is the practice of good agricultural practices. In the sense, it's not just about the proper cultivation techniques or harvesting methods. It is also about giving the right nutrition towards to in the entire crop cycle, and then implementation of integrated pest management. Because we all know that the spray of harmful chemical pesticides, usage of a lot of weedicides, this is the biggest issue coming to agriculture scenario in our country. However, in medicinal plant industry case, what happens is if the farmer sprays excess of chemical pesticides, or even the soil or water condition used for irrigation is not good, if it is polluted, if it has some, say, E. coli bacteria, or some the soil has some heavy metals, the pharma company will reject the produce because it cannot be used in making medicines actually. So the right growing practices, all this guidance needs to be followed by the farmer. Then we also need the necessary support mechanism to test and evaluate the the components which are present in the final harvest actually. Then there is a lot of requirement for a lot of processing and utilization technologies in our country. We need more processing units, extraction units, etc. Then from the last farmers bill, lot of there's a lot of anticipation on this contract farming. And see, the contract farming and connect with pharma companies actually will become a motivation factor, because when you're growing medicinal plants, you need a definite connect with pharma company who is finally going to buy back your produce. So then, coming to why should you grow these medicinal plants in hydroponics? So there are in general, to speak about, actually there are various soilless farming methods. There is hydroponics, there is aquaponics, which is a combination of fish farming or aquaculture with hydroponics, where the fish waste is what is supplied as an organic waste to the plants growing in hydroponic systems. And then there is aeroponics. The name itself says aero means air. So basically, whatever nutrient required by the plant, right? So that nutrient is sprayed directly to the plant roots actually. So the advantages of this is that it allows for maximum absorption or availability of the nutrient to the plant roots, maximum aeration or oxygen supply in the plant roots. And then the topmost advantage is that uh, so in assume a medicinal plant like say ashwagandha grown in soil. So once it reaches maturity, you have to completely harvest the plant, which essentially means that you uproot the plant and harvest the essential roots of the plant, and then the farmer ideally goes for the next crop. However, by growing in aeroponics, what we can do is we can harvest a part of the root, especially if this is applicable to plants like vetiver. It is also used in other segments like say potato tuber production and all, where tubers can be harvested, and then the plant doesn't die. Only a few of the tubers, without disturbing the root system, are harvested, and then the tubers regrow for multiple times. So aeroponics gives that advantage of having multiple harvests from a given crop. So apart from that, what are the other advantages of growing these medicinal plants in hydroponics? We all know that hydroponics gives a higher cropping density, that is a given. However, the major reason why medicinal plants should be grown in hydroponics is because we get more command on the overall nutrient management, which is the most important factor when it comes to growing of medicinal plants. Then in by growing in a protected environment, we can bring better agroclimatic controlled environment for growing the crops actually. So in the sense, whatever the these medicinal plants, when they are growing in the wild, they go through certain biotic and abiotic stresses. So in the sense, in terms of climate or in terms of various like sometimes it might be drought stress. So all those climatic conditions which are naturally required to build up the secondary metabolites, alkaloids, which are the finally the essentials which are extracted, the components which are extracted, right? So for building up of those essential elements, that necessary agroclimatic condition, those we can bring in a protected horticulture and through hydroponic irrigation management. Okay. So then the foremost importance, a complete sterile environment. So because of that, there is no pathogen development, no chemical residues, no chemical pesticides, zero weedicides. So in commercial farming, that's the huge problem farmers face. The weeds compete a lot with the actual plant and spoil the entire nutrient regime and irrigation regime. And then again, improper usage of weedicides is not recommended, and not at all advisable when you're growing medicinal plants. So you can grow with the complete care in the hydroponic or aeroponic kind of a sterile environment. So now when the question comes to, what are all the possibilities of growing these plants in hydroponic. So first, I would like to talk some about some culinary herbs. Typically, they can be used fresh or they are also, many of them are sold as dried herbs. So there is that advantage of, the grower can even dry the herbs and sell at any point of time in the market. So the various herbs that can be grown, basically used for culinary purposes, come like, rosemary, sage, thyme, oregano, lemongrass, chives, culinary basil varieties are there. Okay, however, it is difficult to draw a line here. Some species, like, say rosemary, there is essential oil also, made out of, extracted out of this, which can be used for, skin care and many other purposes. The same applies to lemongrass and basil. The thing is extensive. There are so many varieties of basil. There are culinary varieties like Thai, sweet, Italian basil. However, we know our own holy basil varieties. There are, medicinal varieties of basil, especially the five tulsi varieties, which go into, traditionally we all, a lot of us buy this, panchatulsi drops, right? So, and in our, mostly all our homes, we have this, at least the Krishna tulsi, Ram tulsi varieties and all those things. Yeah. So then coming to the typically the medicinal herbs and root plants, right? The again, the thing is, I have kept the list to minimal here, because one thing about, growing or cultivation of medicinal plants is you need to have, the research data. You should have, practically grown, or you should know someone who has practically grown, or you should have access to a research data that is, published by someone who has done the research, grown this particular crops in any of these farming methods. So I kept a list to minimal based on, kind of the plants which I have grown, and then, based on some research data which I have accessed. So definitely, you might come across more plants. Maybe someone else would have grown different plants, and they would give you a different, maybe more expanded list, extensive list of the plants. So the ones I have listed majorly here are ashwagandha, vetiver, shatavari, makandi is also there. Then typical the root crop, like rhizome ones. And see, because when I say root crop again, even ashwagandha, vetiver are also harvested for their root only. So majorly the rhizome varieties are, turmeric and mango ginger. Though telling just two, but frankly, that there are hundreds of varieties of turmeric actually. Yeah. So now, when growing in hydroponics, the essential factors you have to keep in mind. Okay, as I told already, plants will build up essential oils, the secondary metabolites under stress only. So it is very important that, you replicate that natural growing agroclimatic condition in the farm. Okay, and that can be actually done in a protected horticulture. Okay, then the next thing it is nutrition always. Crop specific nutrients which are like, tried and tested, and research which is published, take the nutrition plan suggested by the literature, and then, supply that to the plants. For otherwise, the plant will simply grow if you give just some generic nutrition, like, even in soil also. If you're growing a medicinal plants in a soil, and you just blindly give some DAP, or like general NPK fertilizers, without testing the soil and water conditions. Yeah. The same way, even in hydroponics also, without having knowledge on, what is this specific crop requirement. Like, say for example, you're growing turmeric. turmeric is a heavy feeder for the kind of a rhizome proper growth inside, and then for the proper essential oil, the curcumin oil build up in the rhizome, right? It requires for example higher amounts of say phosphorus and potassium. So one cannot just take very generic general grow nutrient formulation available in the market and expect the the best yield or essential oil out of turmeric actually. Okay, so continuing that, so I think I started talking about turmeric even before going into that slide, because it has been my, like growing of turmeric has been like my passion since many years. And this it's like our household thing, right? Especially for here, I know a lot of people have sure signed up into this talk from various countries. And a lot of people you are you would have consumed turmeric, definitely not directly because of COVID. I think a lot of people are hearing of this, the turmeric latte and all that. But then here I would like to say that in our Indian homes we are very used to having turmeric. You have a sore throat, or you have some cold problem which generally comes through some climate changes or something. You are see, like say kids drench in rain and come back home. The mother gives small mix of say turmeric and little of ground pepper in milk, boil it and give it, and the problem solved. Yeah. So it's like a golden spice tradition, part of essential part of the traditional medicine Ayurveda. Not just Ayurveda, many other Chinese medicine, traditional, many places, and even in many drugs also. The curcumin extract becomes a part, essential part of many drugs, especially anti-cancer medicines. And then there is anyway coming to, it is native to South Asia, so it's more prominent here. Then the active ingredients basically is the curcumin and turmeron, the curcuminoids. Yeah, they are extracted and used in making various drugs, starting from very simple anti-inflammation drugs, then to sophisticated anti-tumor drugs. And research has progressed a lot, and it is being used now in even in Alzheimer's treatment, etc. So now the seeing the extensive use of turmeric in various segments. I'm just presenting some statistics. The global turmeric market is like 1.5 million metric tons, forecast by 2027. And here in India, we are actually already the largest player globally as producer, consumer, and exporter. Every Indian home by default has turmeric, so we consume turmeric a lot. And the major cultivation area globally also in India accounts to around 82%. Yeah. And we are expecting 30% growth post COVID. Then now here I would like to throw light on one thing, that the some there are so many species of turmeric available actually. Some go the regular varieties with minimal amount of curcumin, usually are the ones which we use for domestic purposes. However, when I say regular, when I talk in terms of technical, these varieties may have a curcumin content of say 2% or so, 3% max if it is a good quality one supplied to by the vendors. However, there are some good varieties, unique ones, like even I heard them about them, and I was like, first when I heard, I was very fascinated, because when we were in searching for the highest quality turmeric, for for a family member who had stage 2 cancer. That is when, some years back, I had come across these, varieties. Two of them I mentioned here, which is like the one is the Lakadong turmeric. It's a place in northeast. The named again is that Lakadong place. And then there is this black turmeric. Okay, these have the highest curcumin content, like 8 to even about 12%. Yeah, which is like, almost 30 times higher the sorry even 70 times higher market value compared to normal turmeric, actually. Because, this is the kind of a curcumin content which the pharma companies look for, especially, the Lakadong variety and the black turmeric variety. We have many other varieties also. Any of you interested, the place to start with for the planting material would be IISR, our own. In India, it is Indian Institute of Spices Research. I'm talking about. They supply, planting material. They guide the farmers on the growing methods of. This they have extensive research. There are very many varieties, like say ISR Pratibha variety, which has known to give a very high curcumin content, like I think 4-5% or 6 maybe. Yeah, so. Now that is where, the future growth is. See, being the highest producer, especially in India, we are already, like, a global player in the turmeric production. Now the gap where we have to fill is growing the highest quality ones. Like say, in my search for Lakadong and black turmeric planting material, I had to wait to procure it from some of the northeastern farmers or suppliers, and it took like, a month or more to just apply, kind of obtain a planting material, actually. Yeah. So imagine that this being the main pharma ingredient, actually. And when you want to do commercial cultivation of this, right, getting on par, like, the this particular curcumin content which I mentioned. So you take a black turmeric seed from farmer. Now the correct irrigation management, the nutrient management plays a very key role, because, you need to enhance that product quality to cater to the nutraceutical industry, or even skincare cosmetic industries. And for that, after getting the high yielding cultivars, right, the next important factor is good agronomy practices, actually. Okay. So then, you need, even like, you need to establish connection with the pharma companies, so that, you will be able to sell this harvest. Now the major cultivation challenges which are being faced in general, you can discuss with some agricultural officers, and they will also share what they majorly think are the challenges. The main thing is, when turmeric, it has to be sold to, say, cosmetics or nutraceuticals industry, right? Appearance matters a lot, actually. The length of the rhizomes, the thickness of the rhizomes, the brightness. There should not be any, holes because of some insects and all which were there in the soil. Then there should not be any compromise on the aroma part of it. There should not be excessive stones and mud, and when you grade the turmeric. Okay. The It should have developed uniformly and reached to maturity. So if, like, a part of the crop has immature content, maybe it might be various things, because of some rot or disease or pest attack during cultivation, right? If the rhizomes are wrinkled, Yeah, so all these things, like, make the grading process a nightmare for the the entire supply chain. It is even for the farmer after harvest, and even for the the pharma companies to accept that, actually. Okay, then achieving, when I talk about uniformity and grading challenges, say for example, if if a same variety of turmeric was procured, say for example, from IIS or some other farmer, uh, the thing is, if that same variety is grown in Salem, we have seen that it had, say, 3% curcumin or little more. Salem turmeric is famous, by the way, again in our country. The same variety grown in Erode, the farmers had achieved 2.5%. In Guntur, in Andhra, it was 1.5%. And if there was a pest attack or some problems, then the curcumin content was too low, less than 1% kind. Now, this is the grading challenges, and which is makes it very difficult for the pharma industry to take the produce, actually. And all these challenges come from the area of cultivation, the variety, the age of turmeric, immature rhizomes, infestation, and all these problems. Okay, now these are the things which kind of problems, which challenges, which hydroponic can solve. Yeah, so uniform nutrition. Turmeric, say, if it is generally a 9-month crop, so uniform nutrition with the growing requirements of the crop, which builds up that right curcumin content and yield, uniform rhizome growth, everything. And especially, to build up that high curcumin, as such, as I said again, turmeric is a heavy feeder, so giving that heavy nutrient, meeting that heavy nutrient requirements. Yeah, okay. Then, my personal, as I told, I have been growing turmeric, especially I have grown, say, even the last year, which I have grown turmeric, and I harvested in the last month beginning, like February month. So in a very normal turmeric variety, which is grown in south, I just procured from some farmer nearby. I could get around some 4.3% of curcumin, whereas from the black turmeric seed, which as I said, I procured from a northeastern farmer, I was able to achieve, say, like 12.1%. Here, I would also like to tell you that, out of many research papers, where people have grown black turmeric in hydroponic and all, I could see that black turmeric, they have published around some 12.3% of tumeron, which they were able to. So, after growing, this testing is also very important for the acceptance by the pharma companies. Okay, and when growing in hydroponics, right? What are the possible growing methods? One thing I would like to say is, understanding of the terminology. So I would like to tell that hydro in when you're growing most of the medicinal herbs, root crops, and all. So one is aeroponics, and when you talk about hydroponic, let us label it like, say, passive hydroponics. Okay, mostly in passive hydroponics, the irrigation, the nutrient is supplied through drip irrigation for a given amount of time. Yeah, so now, in when growing turmeric, the ideal way of growing is, it can be containers, grow pots, or it can be trough beds or large sized grow bags. So when you are putting in any container or a grow bag or even in a trough bed, right? minimum of 1 foot or 12-inch distance between plant to plant, and even the depth of the pot or the trough, whatever you have chosen, it should be 12 minimum. Do not compromise on this. Usually a lot of people, what they do is hydroponic, you do achieve anyway higher cropping density. However, do not try to achieve it at the compromise of plant to plant spacing, especially when growing in these kind of a exclusive crops like turmeric and all, right? Finally, you're growing that plant to harvest the rhizome. So, underneath for the rhizome growth, you should give that much of space for the proper spread out of the rhizome and to allow for free, abundant root growth. Okay. Now, another very important factor when it comes to growing these is root or rhizome crops should definitely be grown obviously in a grow medium. So aeroponics, again, that's not the case. I'm typically talking about hydroponics here. So, and then essentially we all know that coco peat is the most favored grow media and economically the viable one. However, in through my growing experience and the way I have experimented, I have seen better results and excellent growth when I have added amount of perlite also mixed into coco peat. It can be like ideally at least 20 a quarter, 25% or 30% of the media mixture can be perlite. So perlite allows for better aeration because turmeric is a 9 month long duration crop. So having perlite as a grow media along with coco peat, right, ensures that the rhizomes are always having that good aeration in the root zone. Okay. Now, once you obtain planting material, like say from IIS or some other farmers, the you should actually sterilize them with biofungicides like trichoderma, before planting. This ensures that if at all it can be even through when you're purchased or storage conditions or the when it was grown in that particular wherever soil or something, any fungal spores, bacterial infections and all, right? So this kind of a sterilization removes all that, gets rid of all that problems. Yeah. And it avoids future root rot issues and all in the crop. Yeah. Now, turmeric ideal growing temperature is like say 27 to 30, and it thrives well even when the temperature reaches say 35 degrees Celsius also. Typically, as you know, it's a South Asian crop, typical tropical condition thing. A very cool climate slows down the crop growth, especially the rhizome growth and everything, slows down. When I say very cool, even definitely below 20 kind of a thing and all are not, they have not so favorable in the faster growth of the crop. Because again it's a very long it's a long day photo period thing, crop actually for continuous growth. Yeah. Though it doesn't again it doesn't like a harsh exposure as such. Okay. But day length should be higher, but harsh temperature exposure the plant does not require. Humidity is fine. We have seen that it grows well even in our coastal climatic conditions. However, in when growing in greenhouses and all, ensure that that normal humidity conditions we maintain, usually like relative humidity of say 70%. Just maintain that. Don't let it go to like say 85. The crop can thrive, but no need to take that chance. Yeah. Now when it comes to nutrient solutions, as I already said, it is a heavy feeder, and it's like, generally putting your mind to uh, which part of the plant is, like, essentially growing here. In this case here, it is like the root, the rhizome, right? And for that proper rhizome build up, um, there should be more of, phosphorus, potassium, and calcium supply than, a lot of nitrogen supply. Yeah. So okay. You And it is a heavy feeder as well. So in when it comes to hydroponic, an EC of even 2 to 2.4 is very much recommended for excellent growth of turmeric rhizomes. pH just maintain around 6. Even if the pH goes up to 6.5 also, there is not an issue. Yeah. But again, it doesn't do well too much in acidic environment. So that's why mostly in soil we see that, turmeric is not grown in with acidic soils kind and all that. Yeah. So now coming to the next crop which I had wanted to discuss about, which is a stevia, which is the herb. Yeah. Now stevia, actually I came across more like a personal experience, where, a lot of us, especially people who have signed up, if you're from South India, you can relate to this. We are like coffee drinkers, a lot of coffee with sugar. Yeah. Milk and so sugar. So when this was like, I was so my father was using like, artificial sweeteners from a long time, from the time he was his sugar levels had shot up. And then we were never happy with those, artificial sweeteners and all. We wanted more something natural. And that is when, I came across stevia as dried herb. I just found online, and I started purchasing it for my dad. And then, I wanted to grow it, and when I wanted to grow, I searched and in some nurseries and all, and bought some plants and started growing. So then that was years back. Now actually I would like to tell you the kind of, extensive usage of stevia and the scope actually. And here I would like to say one thing here is, turmeric, you know, is well established market. You can see turmeric extraction units. You can see a lot of pharma companies who will be like, ready to buy your produce, provided, you meet all those quality standards which I said. You have to grow, you have to get the harvest lab tested. Then, the market linkage and all those things will work for you. However, the one thing which I have to mention about stevia is stevia industry is still like, it is realized, but then it is still growing actually. Yeah. So finding a market linkage and all those things for stevia, even planting material, getting planting material for stevia is even more difficult than turmeric actually. Okay. However, the industry is going to be huge, because it has that many extensive usages. It is a natural zero calorie sweetener. So it is becoming part of all diabetic diets. It just as a normal tabletop sweetener in making tea, coffee, etc. Then, all the soft drinks, earlier, which were known basically problem when you take soft drinks, aerated drinks, is because of the loaded sugar calorie in those. So this is becoming an alternate sweetener in those, all those soft drinks, even jams, jellies, baking industry. It is being used even in making toothpaste and mouthwashes, because, apart from just about, it's not just about the sweetness. It is known to have, even some antibacterial properties and antioxidants and thing which are supposed to be good for your teeth. Now that's kind of, totally a reversal of the damage that which normal sugar was doing. to your overall life, right? It's like, the calorie addition, and then to the next is the problem with eating sweets, especially with our children. We say always rinse your mouth, otherwise your tooth will decay, like that. So this is supposed to be, totally acting in a reverse. Then that's why, it's becoming a source of antioxidants, and becoming getting used in, like say, medicinal products, at least some making in, especially for this tooth decay kind of an issues and all that. Yeah. So now coming to what is the kind of a status we have in our country, stevia. So stevia, we locally call it, like, madhur tulsi or meaty tulsi. Okay. Now the active ingredients in stevia, which are extracted finally, are stevioside and riboside. Yeah. Now, in general, it's a perennial plant, but we grow it annual, and we get almost, like say, ideally, like say, 4 harvests or even five per year kind. Okay. Now, in India, I would like to specifically give you an idea. Uh, in general, actually, there are two different ways of marketing stevia. One is just dry it and so sell it off as a dry herb. Mostly it will go to households where, it can be later boiled and used as a sweetener with tea, coffee, or, in baking process and all that stuff. And now that's kind of a small scale kind of a production. Now when you are targeting a large scale production, which actually is, like, not much happening in our country, large scale production of stevia, where, even, like say, for example, if a large scale extraction unit is established, right, that extraction unit demands at least some 100 acres of stevia production, and that is not being still met in our country. Okay. So now, when that production is done, the stevia extract is taken out for usage in all other industries, like making of juices or soft drinks or baking and all those purposes. Even in, like, artificial sweeteners, you cannot call it artificial sweetener anymore. It's a natural sweetener. You can and sell that extract. Okay. Now the thing is, almost it's like, 50 grams of stevia dried leaves can replace 1,000 grams of, cane sugar. Imagine the kind of, proportion. And it's three, because, why? Because it's 300 times sweeter than cane sugar. And it's, that is about, how much high the sweet orness or the quality is. But when, as a grower, you think, right, the carbon footprint in the overall growing process is 29% lower actually than sugarcane. Yeah. And especially the water footprint is, we all know how much water goes into sugarcane production. Okay. Now the water footprint stevia, like, brings down to almost, like say, 96% actually. 96% lower than sugarcane. So whereas the sweetness is, like, multifold like this with stevia, the water consumption and all are totally coming down with, when compared to sugarcane. So it's like, in all possible factors, completely a boon to kind of replace the cane sugar. Okay. Now, so but to reach these kind of a market demands statistics, which we already have. Okay. uh, we are not even having a mere 1% in the market actually. Okay. So, and whereas the requirement is, like, so many type 2 diabetic patients in our country, so there is a requirement, but there is a growing is very less. I have personally interacted with the vendors in a lot of people who are, exporting the crude stevia extract from countries like China, Malaysia, and all. So it's poised for exponential growth, not just in our country and but globally as well. Now, coming to the cultivation aspects, right? The As I told, a lot of people still are not cultivating stevia, so there's a lot of possibility of growth, because again, in terms of climatic conditions, because stevia can thrive very well between, like say, kind of 18-degree temperature to even 30, 32, 33 also I have seen when I have grown, it thrived well, even when the temperature reaches at 35 degrees Celsius in my farm. Also, there was no problem. The plant grew very well, actually. Uh, so then, the major again, the major milestone came when it was listed under medicinal plants by our national medicinal plant code, and even it came under subsidy also for so the government also is encouraging full growth. However, when it comes to cultivation aspects, right, I'll tell you the major challenges which the industry is still facing, and which have to be solved is the planting material, actually. Though it is a herb, right, but then the thing is, the seeds are self incompatible. So propagation from cuttings or micro propagation tissue culture in the lab, these are the major ways through which you can purchase planting material. Propagating, growing from seed does not work with stevia, first thing. Okay, now this is also again, long day period crop. So sunlight available for like say 12 hours more, actually promotes a lot of vegetative growth, in the sense a lot of leaf growth. So, and when that much of leaves grow, and good amount of this the steviosides and this thing build up in the stevia, right? Then essentially, the dry mass, actually it can be like say 1:3 ratio kind. So say 3 kg of fresh harvest can give you around 1 kg of dry leaves, actually. Okay, and as I already told, if you're getting into small scale production, the best way would be, just a hygienic area, a small poly house tunnel, dry it, or solar drying is the best way, dry the herb and package in 50 100 gram packets and sell it off online. That would be the best mechanism. And large scale production with the highest, again, quality achieved can go into for extraction units, stevia tech companies and all that. Now, what is the motivation of growing this crop in hydroponic, actually? Okay, the only motivation is yeah one in my experience, what I have seen with stevia is weeds compete a lot with stevia. So growing in hydroponic kind of an environment, zero weeds and labor issues, actually that reduces a lot. Then another major gap which I have seen is, like say, the kind of one is the kind of stevioside or the sweetness buildup only. See, like say for example, when you are using some particular produce, finally, say for its like it specifically comes to consideration, say when you're doing any culinary herb production also. So like say, if I'm using say culinary herbs like basil or sage, yeah, I kind of, we kind of like that aroma which comes with that, right? And now with poor agricultural practices, I just got some harvest of the leaves, but that aroma is compromised, right? We don't like to use it. Talk to any chef in any hotel. First thing they test from a dried herb is the aroma of that. Okay. Now, the same thing applies to stevia also. I am using it for that sweetness. Yeah. Now, instead of one leaf, if I have to use 5 leaves to get that amount of sweetness in my tea, that's the difference which can be achieved with good agricultural practices. That comes with the right nutrition given to the crop. And one more thing which I have to specifically talk in terms of stevia is, I told two essential components which are part of stevia, right? One is stevioside and the other is rebadioside. Now, these two ratio plays a very important role in the growth of the stevia industry as such. People who consumed stevia would know it leaves a bit of aftertaste on the tongue actually. And now that aftertaste might be a little on the end of bitter end if only higher stereoside content is there. Good amount of rabadioside also is there, means that aftertaste will be sweet and not bitter actually. But to achieve that balance between stereoside and rabadioside, the proper nutrition, simply dumping a lot of nitrogen or urea based fertilizers, which is done by our farmers, just increases the yield of the plant but does not give the result with this ingredients within stevia. That balanced proportion of nutrient management, yeah, of course you have to give higher npk to result in the more dry mass of the leaf. However, a balance between say like nitrogen and potassium, yeah, to maintain the right glycosides and the ratio of stereoside and rabadioside, right? That is what can be achieved by growing this plant in hydroponic. Then your product will become like say the sought out for this making this extracts that goes for making baking products or soft drinks. Because finally, because this is all going into the food products which are directly consumed, soft drink which is directly consumed, or a cake or a pastry which is directly consumed, so they leave an aftertaste, bitter aftertaste on the tongue. The industry is not going to accept it. So to meet the industry acceptance to grow that kind of a stevia, that's the motivation for growing in hydroponics, yeah. Apart from that, it's a 4 5 year crop. So in 5 years, monsoon problems or rain damage or pest infestation, one year no monsoon or 1 year storm, or whatever is the problems, okay. If you want if you want a uniform growth of the crop without the plant getting impacted by all these things, again the protected horticulture with the precise event, okay. So that's the reason we can go for growing stevia in hydroponics. Now some things about going because it is a herb, right? And there are various hydroponic methods, so it can be grown in say like higher cropping density, in the sense what in soil usually the whatever cropping density you can achieve in 1 hectare of land, here you can get in 1 acre. So then the proper as I said, proper agroclimate and nutrition, more harvest cycles, you can harvest say like say even 5 times per year, increased yield you can get. And not just increased yield in terms of how many tons is harvested, but how much of that resulted in how much of dry mass finally when I dried the leaves, yeah, that thing. Then as I already told, more like higher stereoside content that can be achieved through appropriate nutrient management, that we have to do in our country. Then other nutrient problems and all which typically are there, like say calcium deficiency and all, which reduce the glycoside buildup and all those things, no problems, all those can be easily covered with hydroponic, okay. So this is what I had wanted to talk as part of my talk today. So before closing, I would like to say stevia, again it is the same way we can grow in this the kind of nft channels shown in this picture, but the channels should be wide, don't go for narrow channels, because stevia root growth is abundant, okay. So don't compromise on the channels. If you want to go economical, happily go with some grow bags filled with again the same cocoa peat perlite mix. It will give wonderful results. But if you're going for an NFT farm, don't go compromise on the channel capacity. Okay, so if you have any further queries, you can always come back to me. Now I would like to talk, these are my contact details. I would like to go through, some questions which have been coming during the talk. I will try to, answer as many as possible in lieu of time. However, please make note of the my contact details and all given in the here, so that you can get in touch with me for if you need any more guidance on these things. Okay, now some questions which I wanted to know. Okay, there are two questions, both on tulsi, and then one question is like how to plant basil is given. Okay, so mostly basil varieties, they will easily grow from good quality seeds. Okay, so you can just grow from seed germination. Yeah, take care of good amount of nutrient, as I told you. If you're growing a culinary purpose, the Thai basil and all those things can't compromise on the aroma. And then if you're going for even the medicinal ones, like which go for panch tulsi and many other things, again you cannot compromise on the essential medicinal buildup in the tulsi. Okay, now then they can we have grown tulsi in all kinds of hydroponic systems. They come out very well in NFT, or typical passive hydroponics, coco peat culture. You can choose any of those. Okay, are the next question. um, what is the applications of hydroponic tech in medicinal plants? Okay, as I told, right? Yeah, if you're going to go for hydroponic for growing medicinal plants, keep these things in mind. First thing is nutrition management. Okay, there and then this because this nutrition management, because of the soil condition, and then the agroclimatic condition. Okay, if these two things have left out a gap in a growth of a certain crop for a long time, right, then that is the motivation to go for some other cultivation method, not just hydroponic. In general, I am telling you, if your soil fertility condition is excellent, on par to meet the growing requirements of that medicinal plants, and the agroclimatic condition is also favorable, right, there is no need to go for hydroponic actually. Okay, so you should really be able to solve these problems which are there, because you're not able to grow medicinal plants because of these poor fertility conditions of the soil or the climatic conditions. Yeah, or maybe you are able to achieve like say better control over the essential oil buildup, or the overall mass root buildup of the plant and all those things. Because like say overall root buildup of the plants we see very well with controlled irrigation in hydroponics and even in aeroponics actually. Okay, now the next question. uh, Nutrient sub, okay, it can be a continuation kind. Is the nutrient supply for all medicinal plants same? No, it is not the same. It is not like growing some general leafy greens with one generic general grow nutrient. No, you have to go through the published research. What is the recommended nutrition for the medicinal plant? And I'll tell you, getting the right nutrition is just the first step actually. When growing medicinal plants, as I told you, right, replicating that natural growing environment becomes the next important factor actually. Okay, so nutrient along with the climate, otherwise it won't the plant will simply grow, but you will not get that necessary outcome from it. Okay, now uh, okay, this I think I all best soil less system for turmeric. Yeah, I already told this. Go for like say cocoa peat perlite mixture with maintaining around 25 to 30% of perlite in the mixture. Okay, Then urban farming, can growing turmeric be sustainable in urban farming? It depends on the industry you're catering to, because mostly turmeric you grow, you want to establish some market linkage, right? And you want to establish through market linkage to some say pharma industry. Then you need large scale production in urban farming, or if I say small scale production, you can just dry that turmeric and powder it and directly sell. But for to cater to that large medicinal or nutraceutical or even cosmetics industry, large scale production, and you should have some farmlands, that is better actually. Okay. Mm, okay. Can hydroponics be applied for plants whose rhizomes are needed? I think this question is answered. Same for turmeric, ginger varieties, and all. Can we cultivate in balcony area and how many days? Okay, so see, as I told, right, so if you're targeting growing in balcony area, it is typically maybe for your own self consumption. So yes, you can grow. Just have some, as I told you, right, large sized grow bags and like 12-inch size grow bags, and grow them. And how many days, that does not vary. The right agroclimatic condition, as I told, like say turmeric thrives from say 25 to 30-degree temperature, and typically it is a 9-month crop. That does not vary if you're growing in a balcony or this thing. So turmeric though can do a little, for if it is if little shade is falling, but then doesn't mean that you can grow in a balcony where not even few hours of sunlight will come. Okay, that much compromise should not be there. Again, the rhizome growth will slow down. When I'm telling this again, one point came to my mind. The minute we talk about hydroponic, a lot of people go ahead and embrace this vertical farming for every crop actually. Okay. So turmeric again, a lot of people would have read that it doesn't need too much of sunlight, it can grow under shade and all that. See here, one point what we would like to recommend is, maybe it doesn't require so much of harsh temperature or exposure, but still the long photo day, this daylight is required. So when if you build some if you grow in balcony, or if you build some vertical stands and put turmeric, too much cropping density, right? Don't compromise on the plant to plant spacing, and even on the sunlight also. It's like you cannot build racks where the sunlight doesn't even fall on the plant leaf. That is a huge compromise actually, so don't do that. 9-month crop, at the end when you harvest, you'll see the rhizome growth didn't happen, and you wasted your time actually. Okay. uh, so do you have a specific method to control bacterial infection or rotting in rhizomes? Okay, see, now rotting of rhizome happens. What are all the various conditions, I will tell you. First thing, I think I covered one thing, is with seed or the planting material, some spores should not spread. Okay, so for that I told you already, sterilization with the biofungicides like trichoderma before planting itself, that will take care. Okay, now during the crop cycle, if any rot has happened, right, the major reason would be you have overwatered. So controlled irrigation mandatory. When you're growing turmeric in cocoa peat, right, the cocoa peat should just be moist, that's it actually. Little wet, and that wetness continues for a lot of time, then this rhizome rot starts. Typically then you're bringing back that same problems which were there in maybe in a general open field soil farming, when there was heavy rain and monsoon for continuous days actually, when there was water logging for a lot of days in the soil. Then what happens, that is when the crop goes through that damage. Now what you did the same mistake in hydroponics, so don't do that, over watering. So but if you have any issues of root rot and all those things, again I would recommend, just drench that cocoa peat in that recommended dosage of the trichoderma formulation. Okay. You if the impact is too much only, then I would recommend mancozeb and all that. But otherwise, trichoderma does its job. Okay. Now, enlist suitable plants for hydroponic and aquaponic. I think I already gave in one of the slides. So, aromatic or culinary herbs, I told various varieties of basil, rosemary, sage, thyme, chives, lemongrass, oregano, all these things. Medicinal, as I already told, go through research data, and when you want to grow also, right? At least from my personal experience, what I would like to recommend is without any experience or hands-on skill training or consultation, do not go for acres of land. Maybe do a pilot project, get results under first-hand experience, get the produce tested, record your experience of what mistakes you have done and not to be done kind, then go for a large scale production. Okay. Mm, is aeroponics better than hydroponics in case of medicinal plants? Depends. Like, say, for example, if I talk about turmeric and all, happily grow in hydroponic only with this grow media. But if you want to typically go for aeroponic kind of a setup, the overall setup, then as I told, right, you should have a typical case study. Like you took a crop like say vetiver, okay, then you want to have multiple harvests of that root, then still the root regrowth can happen again and again for that same crop actually. So go through the typical case studies which are applicable and justify your investment in aeroponics, then go for it. Okay. um, Possibilities of rhizome medicinal cultivation, I already covered. Okay. When you're going for this rhizomes like turmeric and all, right, again, you will be able to give the best of the nutrition, controlled irrigation and controlled agroclimatic conditions, all the things you're able to achieve using hydroponic, right? So now what I would like to do say is, with this, you all these you achieved with certain investment, right, in the farm. So assume, like, say, for example, you go for you gain that market linkage for that exclusive varieties like say black turmeric or lakadong turmeric actually. So what you can then say is, with the same kind of capital investment and operating expenses, with almost no labor problems and all, because you don't need in between so many labor, like for weed management, this that and all those headaches are not there in hydroponic. Then you might as well go for the highest yielding varieties like that lakadong and black, because they are going to, at any point of time, I have seen, if normal turmeric sells like say 30, 40, 50 rupees per kg basis kind, I have seen lakadong and black turmeric varieties having price range of, like, black turmeric even, like, say, even wholesale price of say 1,000 rupees to even 1,500 rupees or more also. Yeah, based on availability, because I told the availability is very less for these crops, right? So because apart from the initial cost of the planting material, right, the nutrient, the water and all that expenses are going to be the same whichever variety of turmeric you grow actually. Okay. So that expands your possibilities. Okay. So I do not want to I think I already overstepped my time. So I will stop the session for now. As I already told, you can note down my details and approach me if you need any more clarification or guidance on this growing of these crops in hydroponics or aeroponics or aquaponic, because hydroponic and aquaponics are the major areas where we my company, Hydrilla, we work on and specialize. So thanks for your time. So I'll sign off and give it to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Mamata, for excellent talk and also interacting with the questions by some of the audience. We cannot answer all the questions, but you have made it clarifying the doubts of many of the farmers. So your contribution and cooperation for this making this webinar a success is very, very useful. Thank you very much.